It's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and today I'm going to show you a project that I'm working on. And what it is doing these maple leaves. I will lay them out here. And so I've got three. I'm going to make another one. Now what these are done in what they call in the hoop. I'm using my embroidery machine, which is my main sewing machine. It's a Horizon 15,000 by Janome. And I downloaded the pattern for this from Embroidery online, and they were running a special. So because it's coming close to my birthday, they were giving me 50% off for the next little while on single designs. This is considered a single design. And I saw this, and this is actually to create quilting squares using applique. And that's what each of these are, an applique. So I thought to myself, well, why not give this a try? I'm not going to make a whole quilt with this because for one thing it would take a long time to do it. It would be a very nice quilt, but no, I don't think I will. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these. I'm just going to make 4 of them, and then I'm going to put them together either as a table runner, or I might make a couple of placemats out of them, or I might make a wall hanging, or even I could make a bed rug as well. So there's lots of potential here. But what I was interested in was doing embroidery machine applique. So that's what I have done here. Now, in the instructions for this, they kind of do something that I thought was just a little bit tedious. They have a diagram that you can use. You trace out and you cut out your fabric according for each piece. Then you lay it onto your background piece, and then the machine will do the actual stitching. It takes a piece, it tacks it down first, and then it'll go around it with what looks like a zigzag stitch. And I thought, well, why am I bothering to do all of that? Because you had to get your needle in the center. It just seemed very complicated. So instead, I'm doing something that I have done before, and even though this is not the way they want you to do it, I think it works out okay. And that's basically, I don't pre-cut the fabric to the actual shape. I let the machine do a tack down stitch first. I cut around that using my applique scissors, then I put it back on the machine and let it go around the edges with the zigzag. And it seems to work okay with that. So I'm going to show you how this works today. And along the way, we'll probably run into something that's idiotic, because it is the Idiot Quilter, but we'll see how it works. So, for anybody who has never done machine embroidering, this is a hoop, okay? And the hoop actually goes onto this piece of the machine, and that's what pulls it through. You'll see that in action in a moment. So, like any hoop, it's got 2 pieces, and you need some stabilizer. Now they recommend it, and it's what I'm using in the instructions, to use a stabilizer like this. And you can see this is kind of sheer and it's kind of webbed. This is called no-show mesh, and it just gives support to the fabric. And you can leave it in after you're done. I'll show you the back of one of these. That's what it looks like when you have it finished. But no one's ever going to see that, because you are going to put a backing fabric on this and you're going to quilt it later. So you can leave this right in. It's washable. It's not water soluble, but it's not going to cause you any problems. At least I hope it's not. Okay? That might be an idiot thing there, but I'm pretty sure it'll be okay. So first thing I need is my stabilizer. I have it centered here on my hoop, and then I need my background fabric. And on all of these, I'm using this particular fabric, and this, I really love this line of fabric. It's from Northcott. And it's their Stonehenge fabric, which is very popular. And I'm just going to center it here on the hoop. Now, I already did some rough cutting before I started the video, so I know what size I need. I could use a bigger piece in here, but why waste fabric? Because it's only going to stitch in about this area. So have it laid down, and I'll just place my hoop into the frame. And you want your hoop to be very snug. Push it in with your palm, and then what I do is I lift it up a little bit and just use my fingers to make sure it's right in the hoop, because the worst thing that can happen to you when you're doing machine embroidery is that your fabric pops out of your hoop. Okay, that's all nice and secure. So now I'm going to put it on the machine and I'll show you what we're doing next. So I'm just going to switch over to that camera. And we slip this under the needle. Now I already have my bobbin thread in there, which is just a white, because no one's going to see it, so I don't need to match it with my top thread. And now I need to thread my machine. So the last color I used was a yellow thread. I'm just going to cut that out. And because I'm doing the stem piece first, let me grab the piece of fabric for that. So basically it's this little piece of fabric here. Put that to the side. And I'm going to thread my machine with dark green thread. And I just kicked this over a little bit. Sorry about that. There we go. My space is very tiny. It's hard to get everything in the shot, including me. So I'm just going to thread my machine very quickly. And this machine does have an automatic threader, which is a little temperamental, because sometimes I have to do a little fine tuning to just get it right. Let's see what happens this time. Good, right in, no problem. Okay, now I have on my screen over here, which you can't see, the layout for this project. And the first thing we're going to do is put what I call an outline stitch or placement stitch, which will draw the shape of the stem, which is kind of a little triangle. And that stitch line that it'll put on here is what I'm going to use to align my fabric. So this could get loud, I'm not sure. Here we go, and hope everything works okay. Nope. There's our first problem. Didn't like the sound of that. Something's not right. I may need to check my bobbin, and I kicked the camera again. Sorry about that. Camera's sitting on a tripod. So I'm just going to pull this up, and I'm just going to go in, check my bobbin, hit it again. Okay. So just, oops, pulling this out, making sure. Sometimes that happens. After all, it's a machine, it's technology, and when you're doing a video, you know that it's going to crap out on you. Okay, I've got that threaded. So I'm going to put the hoop back in. Okay. Make sure I don't have any of my stabilizer fabric underneath my hoop, because that can cause you some grief too. And did that again. Oh. Okay, so we're going to try this again. No. Okay, when this happens, then it's rethread the machine time. Now, I've been doing this all morning without any problem, and when I decide to videotape, that's when it's going to give me some grief. But we'll get it going here. And my threader missed. Just to do a little fine adjustment. Okay, it's in. Let's see what happens this time. There we go. That's what should be happening. So I know it's difficult for you to see it on the screen because of the color and the angle, but what I now have is a placement line. And it just drew a single stitched line all around in here, and I can see it, and now I know where I put my where I can put my fabric. So I just make sure I have enough fabric cut that'll be big enough to cover that piece, and I'm usually fairly generous with how much I put in there, because we are going to be cutting it back in a moment, as you'll see. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that detailed, or that placement stitch again on top of this to hold down the fabric. Okay, so my fabric is now down where I want it to be, but before I can do the zigzag stitching around it, I need to cut it out. So I'm just going to take the hoop off, and I'll switch the camera. And here we are. So here's my piece. Now, I mentioned applique scissors. That's what these are. Duckbill scissors sometimes they're called, because they have this curved bit here, and this makes cutting fabric close to the stitches really easy and helps you to avoid cutting your stitches. So what I like to do is I just pull up the edge of the fabric and I cut in towards the stitches, but remember, I'm not cutting the stitches, and I just cut along right next to the row of stitching. Once you've done this a couple of times, it's really easy, and these are the best scissors in the world for doing this. Now, a lot of people I have seen do not use these kind of scissors. They use little snips, which is fine. If that works for you, then by all means. But I'm telling you, once you've had these and you've used them, it makes this job really easy and somewhat enjoyable. So there, I've got my piece cut out. I'm going to take it back, put it on the machine again, and this time we're going to sew the zigzag that goes all the way around. Okay, here we go. Oops. And I just realized I didn't switch the camera, so you can't see what I'm doing. So let me do that. There we are. And away we go. Now the first thing it does is it puts another row of stitches that are inside the fabric. So we have a little 1/4 inch space, it looks like, and now it's filling it in with the zigzag. Now for the first couple of pieces here, I'm going to do it in real time, but then I will switch over to fast forward so that you can see this working but not have to sit there all day and wait for this to be done. This project doesn't take a long time though overall. It takes maybe about 20 minutes from beginning to end in real time. Okay, I'm done. So now I'm going to my next piece, and I'm looking at my screen over here, which you can't see. It shows me the next outlined piece, and I will need to change color because I have decided that that is going to be a red material. So I'm just going to snip my thread from the top, and I'm going to switch over to my red thread. And as I mentioned, I am using Floriani embroidery thread. I love Floriani. I have a lot of Floriani. I probably have over 300 colors in Floriani. And it's just something I started with when I first got this machine, and it's the only one I've ever used since. Okay, so, oops, I forgot to thread it. Thread it. Try this again. The automatic threader is great. And when I go to one of my other sewing machines that doesn't have this, I forget, and well, I don't know, I just love the automatic threader. Okay, so we're threaded, and now we're going to do the outlines or the placement stitch. Okay, so I've got my placement stitch, and I noticed that my thread did not get completely cut, and that happens sometimes. Just get that out of our way. And I'm going to take my red, and you see I've just cut a very generous piece, and I just want to make sure it covers that whole outline. And make sure my machine is at the proper spot for this tack down stitch, and away we go. Okay, so now my fabric is tacked down. You noticed there a moment ago there was a little bit of thread hanging out of here, a tail, and I want to remove that just so it doesn't get caught up in the needle, because then you're going to get a mess. What you should do is turn off your machine, first of all, stop it, the needle, then cut it, then start it again. That's the safe way to do it. I have a tendency just to let the machine keep going and I cut it off and take my chances. Excuse me. I am a professional. Do not do this at home. I can't say that with a straight face. No, I just do it that way. Okay, I know I shouldn't. So do as I say, don't do as I do. Whatever. Okay, we're going to take this and we're going to cut it. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the other piece. I'm just going to get my applique scissors in here. And when you cut this next to the line, if you pull the material slightly, it kind of comes off much easier and you get a straighter line. You don't want any excess material next to this stitch line. Now on some patterns, you can have a little bit of fabric that hangs out beyond the stitch line because the satin stitch or whatever they're going to use to go around it cover it up. But generally speaking, you want to cut as close to the stitch line as you can get because it makes a nicer finish. And you just take your time. And you want to be careful that you don't pop your fabric out of the hoop, because getting it lined up again in the proper place for the next round of stitches is not impossible, but is not easy to do. So you don't want to put too much pressure on this and have your hoop come apart. So I'm just about finished with this cutting of this piece. And if I see any little scraggly fibers, I kind of clean those up too at the same time. Now if I had cut some of these stitches, it's not the end of the world because it's going to have the zigzag over top of it. So that's not a problem, but you don't really want to cut them either. But if you make a little mistake and you cut a couple stitches, it's not the end of the world. It'll still work. Okay, switching over. So now we're ready. I'm checking the machine to make sure that it's all lined up here. And so this is the zigzag. Well, it will be the zigzag in a minute, once it does that little inner stitch line. Now, just as a little aside, when you're doing this kind of thing, and you know your machine well, you can tell whether something's not sewing right or there's a problem about to occur because you can hear it, because you know the sound of the machine. I do notice that sometimes when they go around some of these sharper curves right in here, that the machine will make a little bit of a clunking noise. That's just the bobbin thread underneath being pulled at a sharp angle. It shouldn't give you any problem. If you hear that repeatedly, stop the machine and check your bobbin and your top thread. So we're coming along here. We're getting almost to the end. But you can see the advantage of doing this embroidery machine applique. If I was to do this on my regular sewing machine, and I could, I'm the one that has to manipulate it all around. But these pieces have, you know, a fair number of curvy spots, which I don't know about you, but I find those somewhat difficult to do. I have to slow the sewing machine right down. I have to do it sometimes one stitch at a time to get the right angle in. This, of course, has it already programmed into it, so we don't have to worry about that at all. Now, some people may consider this cheating. I don't. I consider it using technology to your advantage, and I'm all about that. So we're just about finished this piece. And there we are. So I'm going to do the same procedure. The next part is down in here. I'm going to have the machine lay down my placement line. I'm going to put my fabric on top of it, do the tack down line again, take the hoop off the machine, cut around with my applique scissors the part or the piece, and then I'm going to put it back on and I'm going to do the zigzag. So I don't think you need to see that. I think you've got the idea. So I'll come back when I have all of that done. Okay, so I'm on the last piece and I've got it tacked down, and now I'm just going to finish it up with the zigzag stitch. One thing that you can't see while this is doing this is my setup for my spools of thread. I have a little rack that will hold 5 spools of thread, and that makes it really easy when you're doing embroidery, because you can pick out your 5 first colors of a project, and some projects are going to take more than 5 colors, of course, and have them all lined up and hooked through the little antenna bar that comes out from this 5 spool setup, and ready to go. It saves you some time in your threading process. It also can kind of help you keep track of which thread is number 1, which one is number 2, etc. So we're almost finished this. We're coming around to the second last curve, and all has been going well on this, which is great. Another little tip I've found when I'm using this machine is keep your machine well cleaned, especially when you're embroidering, because you get a lot of fluff from the embroidery thread down inside your bobbin casing. So after you've done a project, it's probably a really good idea to take a little brush and pop out your bobbin casing and clean the inside all out, and that's probably a good time to give it a drop of oil as well. A clean machine, believe me, will give you less problems. Okay, so we are finished. Now, before I take it off the machine, the last thing I'm going to do is have it stitch a single stitch line all the way around this. This acts as a guide for me when I cut the fabric out. I believe in this particular pattern it is there so that you can match up your squares if you're going to make this into a quilt. So it's just going to go around the perimeter, stitching this line. Didn't like the sound of that. That's okay. Like I said, I know the sounds of my machine. See, I've got some wayward threads up here that need to be removed. And we're on the last line. And we are done. So now I can remove it from the machine. and do the trimming, and I'll show you what that's all about here. I'll just switch cameras. And here we have it. So now we can pop it out of the frame, just like so. Push that to the side. And so you see, here it is. Now, yes, you will have a few stray threads, and it doesn't really bother me because this is all going to be covered up when I put in the batting and then my backing fabric. But for now, I'll just trim up these here so that they're out of the way. A couple more here. Okay, that's good enough. And then we're going to flip it over. Now, remember, and I know you can't see it, but I do have a line that goes all the way around this, which will help me to cut this square. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm looking for my 1/4 inch marked line here, and I'm just going to lay that down on top of my stitched line and take my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to cut it right through there, and then just rotate it around, and I'm going to do the same on this stitched line. And my 3rd one. And the last one. So there we have it. Move that out of our way. And we have our square, which will go along. Move some of this stuff out of our way here. And I'll just show you what it could look like. This is not necessarily the configuration that I'm going to be doing. But I could do it this way. So now you see, I'll give that a bit of a press as well. But now you can see that how this could become an entire quilt. But I told you I'm not going to make this into an entire quilt. But I think I may make it into either a wall hanging, or it could be a table runner, or it could be a couple of placemats, whatever. I don't know yet. When I know, I'll let you know. So, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you again for another episode of The Idiot Quilter.